Hi, so this is Lisa from Life with Fife. Today I wanted to do something a little different. Normally on this channel I talk about creativity and how creativity, when we lean into our creativity, how that helps our lives to take on more meaning and makes our lives more beautiful. And I thought it might be really cool to talk to my friend Morgan, who I work with and who is a really beautiful person who we work here at the school and we have different roles at the school. But Morgan does a lot of really amazing and interesting work outside of the school, which she can share with you. But I wanted to talk about how we curate our lives and how we can apply the same principles of creativity that we use towards making sweaters and creating other things in our lives to creating a life that really is meaningful and lovely. And I thought it might be fun to talk to Morgan and hear how she's created the life that she has, which is a beautiful life. And I thought it might be an interesting conversation for us all to hear. So Morgan, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, and hi to everyone.
So I guess we could just, start off with the question, like, what is your definition of a good life? Like, how would you define that?
Mm-hmm. I think, well, to your point about creativity, I think that a good life has something where we're carving something out for ourselves, to express ourselves, to be in stillness. I think there's just a lot of ways that we reach out to try and make things to have things in place to make a good life, but I think it's really, if we can come back to the simple. So for me, it's really time in nature for sure. Stillness in nature, listening, observing, being in nature, listening to water run on the stream, and with no purpose.
With no expectation, just being there, and
and seeing what comes, right? Like what emotions, what thoughts, what experience arises from just being in nature with no purpose. Is it like this morning I was down at the river and there were these butterflies that were on the rocks, and just sitting there and watching them sit on the rock, and their wings would beat and then they would stop, and they would beat a little bit, and you'd see the wind come by and their wings would flutter a little bit because they're so delicate that just like a little breeze would flutter their wings. And like, that is so simple to watch a butterfly on a rock, and yet so profound. And I don't think that we make space for those kind of experiences in our lives, and that they're so deepening, and they just bring a lot of presence. So that's where I am right now, with just really trying to dive into the simplicity and listening and hearing and becoming more sensitive to what nature can offer, the wisdom of that. So yeah, carving that time out and that space out for ourselves, I think, is a good life, and having connections with other people who want to have these kind of conversations, and talk about gratitude, talk about awakening, talk about openness, presence, and the avenues towards that. Those kind of conversations are so rich and fulfilling. That to me is also part of a good life. I'm sure there's a lot more things.
Yeah, but it makes me think, so like, would you be able to live, I mean, we live in beautiful Vermont, right? And so, of course, nature is everywhere, and that's part of why we came here as well. We wanted to have that be more of our lives, because where we lived before, it was not. Even though there were beautiful spots and all that. So just in terms of like, I'm not pushing for you to like write this down and like, let's you know, quantify exactly what you mean, but so if when you were younger and you were planning your life, did you think about, you know, because you're also a New Yorker, right? So did you think that you wanted to be in a beautiful place like Vermont? Was nature part of what you had in store for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, although I didn't grow up in the city,
Yeah.
so I did grow up in a place that had woods behind me.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents would commute to the city to work.
Right. So you had some of that as a child. Yeah.
Yeah, so that feels like home to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because I grew up in Long Island, and there was nature there. There were beaches there. You could find little kind of areas of foresty. You know, you could walk for a little bit. I don't want to make it sound like Long Island doesn't have beautiful nature. It does, but especially now, it feels, you know, so crowded, and it feels like traffic, and it feels like a lot of that. That's the main experience that you have, and so it really was like, I feel like craving nature was part of what brought us here, you know. And it's interesting that you have this almost like communicative relationship with nature, right? You go into nature and it speaks to you, and that's how you inform your day or your life in some ways, right? And so it's this, so when we look at like people who talk about manifestation and creating the life that they want, a lot of times it sounds like it's coming completely from within them, right? Their personality, their desires. You hear a lot about people saying, you know, let's manifest your desires. This is a big thing. But it's interesting that you talk about listening, right? Listening as part of, listening is part of it. And it's just an interesting approach. And it seems like more co-creative, right? Than just focusing on your desires. But do you ever does that piece of it ever come into it for you, like something that you want to do, and then just a desire for something simple? Like how do you kind of bring that into your life?
Yeah, I feel like a recent example for me was just having the desire to, whether it's teach meditation or offer healings or whatever it is, could there be some financial in that?
Like, is it, to enrich your life and perhaps pull you away from a regular job, or just not really? What was
just maybe on the side.
Just as a side thing.
Yeah. And more of a curiosity of could something that I love doing bring some kind of monetary, because I'm always really inspired by you, being an entrepreneur in a whole bunch of different ways. And so I think I have this idea of there's something so empowering about that. But then there's this, I think when we cling and we attach and there's other layers on it, it just, there's no doorway in, right? Like when we're stressed about it and we're wanting, and we're coming from that place of lack, right? It's like the door's not open, so there's that sense of letting go and surrender and all that piece, right?
Yeah.
But I think I just kind of put it out of my mind.
Yeah. But okay.
And so then this is just a recent small example.
Yeah.
I was at one of my absolute favorite places to go. It's this small little store in Chester, Vermont. And they sell because I also do sound healing, you know that. So that's where I've gotten my instruments, but it's a really small place and it's by appointment only, and they're just very intention there about the instruments that they buy, and they're so wonderful when you're in there. You can have amazing conversations, and I was talking to the owner about how, because the last time I had gone, I was talking about how I'm doing these meditation classes at the prison, and that they wouldn't let me bring in my singing bowls, and it's like, oh, we'll see if, you know, keep trying, and so I was really excited the last time I went to say, oh my God, they let me bring my singing bowls in, and it's so wonderful, and the men love it, and they lay down and just kind of, and he said, are you getting paid for that? And I was like, no, you know, it's volunteer. And he said, okay, I'm gonna write a check for $200 for you. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, I want to support what you're doing. And so that's the kind of thing that, like, I feel like that's such a really beautiful example of, I never could have planned that. I could never have guessed that. I could never have come up with that, you know, and it just, it like came in like a feather on the wind and just like blew into my life, you know? So there's something about that. There's something about just
letting things be, just moving freely. And then the other day we were talking about this kind of, and you mentioned something about that you wanted to do a non-for-profit. Was this before you had that conversation with him, or was it as a result of the conversation?
No, I had that idea before, that just floating around.
It's kind of interesting though, that you had that idea and then someone basically...
Oh, you're right.
You know.
Yeah, you're right. That is what happened. I didn't put those two together.
So he did that first, and that maybe sparked an idea.
No, I had that idea first.
So that's really interesting. You had this idea.
You're right.
And then he kind of like did what, I mean, that's what he's
that
about to
what
support your work, right?
You're right.
Because Morgan was sharing with me this idea that, you know, well, why don't you share the idea?
Yeah. Just that, I'm just drawn to bring, I guess, drawn to bring meditation and healing, various kinds of healing, even healing that I don't do, into places like prisons, like, you know, domestic violence shelter, wherever it is. And, but there's not funds for that. So, you know, you have to want to volunteer your time. And I thought, wouldn't it be a neat idea that there could be a way for people who have these great gifts to be paid, and then maybe be more likely to go into these spaces. So there you go, you're right, that did just happen.
So that is interesting, right? Right, that's kind of interesting because because it raises, you know, so much of this is like, they talk about the universe responding to your, you know, to when you are in the right space, and you know, that just sounds like a perfect example of that. You know.
Yeah, I think too, like the more that we're in acceptance of life, right? And we're more, so that means like, right, whatever's happening in the present moment, good or bad, right? Yeah. The more we're in acceptance of that, I think the more that we have access to a deeper intelligence that's not the egoic, I want, you know, and there's that access to a deeper knowing that can then potentially manifest something that's...
Well, acceptance is the first step, right? Like if you can't accept where you are, where are you, right? What are you feeling? You're feeling resistance, you're feeling frustration, you're feeling unhappiness, right? And that's not going to be conducive in any way towards moving into something else. And acceptance is, it's a big thing. I see that because like true acceptance it's like when you really have like acceptance of all things in your life, pleasant, unpleasant, challenging, amazing, right? There is a gratitude that comes, and there's also like a maturity that comes from like realizing that it is all of those things. Life is not going to be just amazing, wonderful, you know, unicorns and rainbows 100% of the time. And so the sooner that we kind of realize that, I think, and it's really taken me a long time to realize that, even though life hasn't been that way for me, I feel like there was always a part of me that believed that's what life, a good, like I bought into the Instagram or whatever, like that a good life is that perfect, right?
Yeah, I heard this one recently, and I forgot she's one of Thich Nhat Hanh's, a monk there, and she said, someone had asked a question, there's just so much suffering, when does it get easier? And she said, well, if there wasn't suffering, there wouldn't be happiness. So she said, so I'll take like a little bit of suffering, maybe not too much, but
right.
a little bit of suffering so that I can be happy.
Yeah.
Because you
need both. You need that.
You can't. There is no happy. You wouldn't feel happy if you didn't know what suffering was. Yeah. So, so we can be grateful for the suffering too, because it makes us know happiness.
Yeah.
Right. And then what else did you say that just made me think of something too? And just the idea too that the acceptance piece, right? Can we accept? Because sometimes maybe our manifesting isn't happening because maybe we need to suffer a little bit more, and we need to deepen a little bit more with that, and then see what unfolds from that. And I think a lot of times manifesting is so much of a pushing, and
as opposed to just allowing.
Allowing, yeah. I think particularly just in our culture, there's so much consumption and so much distraction, and so much grasping. And how can we clear some of that off the table, and then see what seeds want to bloom when we take some of those things off? And that's, for me, can I just have an aimless walk, an aimless sit in nature, and just let that soak, and I think we think, well, we're not doing anything. If you're doing,
right, I'm not getting something done.
I'm not producing.
Yeah.
And there's such a lack of humility in that, because there is so much wisdom that will rise to the surface when we give it the space. We think all the wisdom and all the stuff has to come from us.
Yeah, and none of it does, really. I shouldn't say that. It's in us, right? We know it's in us, but we have to allow it we have to connect with it. We have to, and I think of all the times in my life that I wanted things, and they either I got them and they weren't good for me, or I didn't get them and I was so grateful I didn't get them. And there's many times that I feel like I don't even know what I don't give to me what I should have, what is best for me, because I don't even know what I want, really. I know what I think I want, but I don't know that that's what's best for me, right? I don't know what's gonna, and it's this whole idea of aligning. I have my guru, you have nature, right? It's like aligning with some kind of, and I think of nature as a guru, as a teacher, right? As a, there's many people who say, you can communicate with nature. You talk to a tree when you have a problem, which sounds crazy, but it doesn't really. When you spend time in nature, you are hearing from nature. And I don't really have a point with that, just other than that letting go of sometimes just saying, I don't know what's best for me, or I don't know, and I just am open to receiving. And I think that just gives so much space and lets go of some of that. We have this Western belief that we have to go out and achieve and do, and it's not really the way to a happy life always.
Yeah, and the funny thing with manifesting is we're manifesting right now. You're gonna manifest no matter what you do. That is life. That's just us being human. But I think there is so much lacking of how do I do being? How do I do being?
Yeah.
And I listened to this great podcast. It was John Mackey, he's one of the co-founders of Whole Foods. And his big thing, one of his premises is gratitude, appreciation, and love in a massive, multi-billion-dollar company. And he said, people look at it and they think like that's the soft stuff. That's not going to get us somewhere. And he's like, that's the foundation, man.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we're humans.
Right.
You build off of that, and you can do things that are hard in a loving way.
Yeah.
But there's that, you can have allowing
Yeah.
where it can then produce something,
Mm-hmm.
And I would just say to anyone who thinks that they don't go hand in hand, go try it.
Right. Go
Like that's all I would say. Go, just see for yourself and make it into a little bit of practice. I feel like the more I get connected being out in nature, I still feel like I'm like an infant trying it and seeing what it has for me. But I now go out, and there are times where I just like the moment I get in the trees and the birdsong and the wind and the smell of it and all of it. And by the way, it's also scientific. Like there's all sorts of chemicals coming off the trees, and there's also your bare feet on the ground.
They talk about this with people who garden, that they actually get some kind of chemical.
Yes. Yeah. There's all sorts of scientific, biological connections and pieces that happen through the body. And I think the more we get in tune with that, like I sometimes just go out into the woods, and the moment I get there, I start crying. Yeah. And it's not for anything, but that being a human is not easy. Yeah. So I might not have someone who has an illness in my family, something big that would make me cry. It's just like a letdown of
collective suffering of the planet.
It's just, being a human has all its things, like whether it's an interaction, it can be just such little simple things. You don't even have to do much in a day, that there can be a buildup, and it's like such this beautiful invitation to just let down. Yeah. And that there's just even a mystery in that. Like I don't have to be able to articulate like what's going on for me right now, what happened that this is happening. Like just let it out. Yeah. And just be there. That human doing versus human being. Go be.
Yeah. And it's also interesting because I've heard it said that like people, in my tradition or whatever, in my lineage, I suppose, like people talk about, I'm not the doer. I'm never the doer, right? I don't do anything, that things happen through me. Like I'm not the doer. And I've heard it said in other traditions as well. And it is really interesting that when we take away this sense of like, I'm doing, right? As opposed to just, in Western culture, we call it allowing, right? It's just like letting it come through. But it really is, it's aligning our will or surrendering our will to a greater will, right? And then getting out of the way and just kind of like letting things happen,
Yeah, that there's that idea, right? In Zen, they call it, the empty rice bowl, beginner's mind, right? How do I empty myself so that then things can actually come in, instead of, or they call it, right? Like, may I be a vessel, or may I be the hollow bone, right? It's, how do we create that space, that heart space? How do we open up, like our true nature, like what they call it, like Buddha nature or whatever, you don't have to use that terminology, but our true nature is expansive. Yeah. And we do a lot of, constricting and holding in and tightening of our body, heart, and mind, everything, And so how do you open up to that, space and vast, infinite?
It's always there. I'm just thinking, like, I did this with the kids this year, and I was like, just everybody close your eyes, and just imagine inside of your mind right now is just wide open space and just expansion,
That's huge.
And they all could access it instantly, whether they believed it or not. They could all like feel that, and it was like really, that's what we all are. That is the, that's what we are, and so,
And I think that when I'll do the, crystal bowls sound healing in my classes, that's exactly what I talk about. I just want to get people like into the spaciousness of their heart. And then I think, let the sound take you beyond the boundaries of your body and out into the cosmos, like reach out to infinity with your sense of awareness and open up. And because you think about it, right? So often, where's our awareness? You know, right in this little rectangle, right so close, you know, like we're sucked in right there. And it's like,
it's everywhere, it's everything. It's amazing. Okay, so then, and you, I know, you know, you have a meditation practice as well as your time in nature, right? I have my chanting, which, so in my tradition, you know, Maharaji says, you know, everything is accomplished by saying the name, right? The saying the various names of God, that's what if he taught anything, that was what he said, you know, that everything is accomplished. And so that makes me think of what you're talking about right now, that like just getting out of the way, being in a place where we are not accomplishing anything. It's not done. We are not the doers. It's a matter of allowing, you know, how would you define what comes through us? How would you define that?
And I think whether, inspiration or, because that's the thing, I think that then when we have that open slate, then there's a place to write on it, right? And then I think that inspiration does come in of ideas, of ways of doing and moving our lives forward in inspiring ways. And then we get inspiration ideas on that, and then we're moving, we're following the flow of water. You know, that it's not that things don't get produced and don't get done. It's just that maybe they come from a deep sort of universal intelligence.
So do you believe, like, are you a Buddhist in the sense that you don't really believe in God, or do you believe, like, what's your...
You know, I love, in some, like, indigenous, they'll say, you know, like, great spirit, you are named by 1,000 names and you are the unnameable one. So it's hard to put words and right to something that's a mystery. And that's something that really is more of an experience than a concept, right? Like when you're chanting, you know, and you're connecting in that way, there's just there's an experience of that mystery, of that.
And it is a deep mystery. I don't really, like, even though it's just funny because, you know, it's the same thing. We believe the same thing. It's just how we frame it in our mind, I think, because I feel it's a mystery. I don't really understand it. I give myself over to it as best I can, right? I feel like surrender is a big thing. And I feel like putting my faith in this being is a big thing, right? So, but do I understand that? Do I know what I'm really saying? Like, I don't really understand it. It's just kind of, well, it's a lot to talk about in this conversation, but it's a lot. And it's, you know, but it's from, you know, it comes from deep inside me. It comes like this will to, it comes from the fact that I haven't been able to, like, I just feel like I lead myself in all the wrong directions all the time. All the time. So,
because we're human.
Right. And so it's like, I'm giving up at this point. Like, I'm just giving up. I'm giving it all over to you. And since I have done various stages of that, my life has done nothing but improve. So, you know, so I'm just going with what works. So, yeah, so.
No, I think there's I say for everybody, right? There's so much beauty that if you just allow, like, peel back the first layer, you know, and like allow that spaciousness, allow yourself to put things down and just go be, you know, like this beauty and purpose and just arises.
Yeah.
It has a place to be now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, there's an expression, you have to clean the cup before you can put anything else in.
Yeah.
So do you, okay, so then what about like desire, and what about karma, and do you believe in karma?
What are you defining as karma?
So karma is, so there's two ways of looking at karma, right? There's karma that is why we're here. Like I would say there's like, that we're here to run off karma. Like basically, according to my tradition, there's multiple lives, and we keep being reborn in order to, because of karma. It's like because of, karma can be as simple as unfulfilled desires, right? So you come into this life to achieve something that you couldn't achieve in your last life. You come in to learn the lessons that you weren't able to learn in your last life. And so there's everything is karma. So there's one way of looking at every single thing our conversation right now would be karma, or, you know, the weather, every single aspect of life is karma. And then there's also that our thoughts are karma, like what we believe and what we think are actually a result of karma. So the fact that we can even have this conversation, that we can think about it, that we have something in ourselves that we have some kind of interest in even pursuing this, is karma. And that's good karma. That would be considered good karma. Because a lot of people don't even think about this, right? A lot of people just don't even have they're just not interested in it, right? And that is also karma. So, and then there's bad things that happen, right? There's good things that happen, there's bad things that happen. And so, how much does that play into our lives and like the kind of life that we live? Or what do you think about that? Because I guess I should start with what I do believe that a good deal of our lives is karma. It's just like, you know, the fact that we live in a place where there isn't, you know, we're not in a war zone, is that we have a certain amount of good karma. The fact that we are safe, that we have homes, that we have jobs that we like, all of these things, like 90% of the planet, you know, don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then, you know, I look at people who are, by Western standards, who are, you know, amazingly successful and amazingly wealthy. And I sometimes wonder, like, do they have good karma? Is it good karma or bad karma? Are they, you know, it's just an interesting, because, you know, you could go through life having everything that you want, and is that really good? To have everything you want all the time, or not necessarily what you deeply want, but your pleasures are constantly being fulfilled, and the simplest desires are being fulfilled all the time, and you have access, and you have power, and you have all these things, right? And are these things a result of good karma? Are they, yeah.
Okay, so there's a few things there, but I think even if you do have the means to have whatever material desires satisfied, you're still human with loneliness and grief and all those other pieces, and they could be much stronger for you, or they could be not as much. And then if there are multiple past lives, future lives, if that's all me, if all those people, all those experiences are me simultaneously, right? Then everyone has both, right? Because maybe I was in a war zone in the last one, I'm gonna be in a war zone in the next one, you know, and this one happens to be this. And then really, is there good or bad? Right? Because if it's all, the aim of all of it is to have us learn, and if learning maybe is, then the whether good or bad, it's all accomplishing that piece.
Yeah, but there is objective like stuff that just sucks that happens to you, right? There's like stuff
100%.
and so yeah, even though in the end, right, it's like, you know, like if you look at someone like the Dalai Lama, right? He's had like a really objectively challenging, difficult life, but yet he's peaceful, he's happy, he's achieved great things in his life, right? So none of that held him back, but he had a lot of what would be called challenging karma, which I guess speaks to the point of like what's good, what's bad, right? Did he need to go through that to be the Dalai Lama? Like, was he born, you know, like it's just.
And I guess that's it too. It's like, you know, you can have your outer external life situation, whether you're in a war zone or whether you have billions of dollars, right? And then who are you in that? Who are you in that situation, right? Are you in the war zone and you're, you know, I cannot speak to what it is to live a life like that. But I can look at my own simpler life, and I can see people at this school, wherever I work, and there are people who are miserable, right? And when I say miserable, you know, it's just, if other people don't have the tools, they don't have whatever it is, and life was really hard, and they didn't have, I don't know, whatever it is that makes it that it's so difficult for people. And then other people who are in this, you know, same situation, and it's,
well, you know, and you can be poor and
like
have
the Dalai Lama.
and you can be someone in India who's really poor but come from a really loving family, like a truly loving family, right?
Yeah, anywhere on the planet,
Anywhere,
absolutely. You
right?
can,
I'm just like thinking of the place where there's
Right.
like intense poverty and come from a really loving family and grow up with that love, and that, you know, that makes it possible for you to have pleasure, not pleasure because it's not material pleasure, but you can access peace and you can access love. You can access love, right? And so I think a lot of times what I see are a lot of, not necessarily hero, but in general, in where we have so much, we also are missing that piece of love. We're missing that love, you know, and kids are missing that love. So no matter how many, I don't know, video games, whatever it is that they have, you know, no matter how much material stuff they have, if you can't access love, it's meaningless, right? It doesn't really make you happy. It may give you momentary pleasure, but it doesn't satisfy you deeply.
Yeah, I just talking about, it's so funny because I was just talking about desire, and there's this Buddhist idea around desire that there's 3 kinds of desires. So one is the desire to satisfy our sense pleasures, right? And you can think of yourself eating a meal, right? And just down to the simple, right? I take a bite, and my sense pleasure, I want to take the next bite. So oftentimes we can recognize this in ourselves. We're chewing, and our fork is in our food ready. We're ready to go, you know, for the next bite. And I think that that's also, you know, like microcosm of so many ways that we are in life. It's like, you know, whether it's shopping, I bought that, but now I'm already thinking about the next thing, right? So
you become better at shopping.
Which kind of ties into the next one. So that idea of, right, just wanting the desire to fulfill sense pleasure. And the next one is the desire to become something. I want to become wealthy. I want to become a wife. I want to become a professional. I want to become important. That piece of that desire. And then, which kind of goes hand in hand, the next kind is the desire to get rid of. I want to get rid of my grief. I want to get rid of my anger. I want to get rid of my suffering.
I want to push it away and not feel it.
And so then we're always kind of toggling between those 3, and it's just an interesting thing to
categorize it
and look at ourselves. Like in what ways am I desiring right now? How is that playing out in my life? And it's totally human. Like, or else, like, right, there wouldn't be this Buddhist. They love lists. You know, there wouldn't be that. it wouldn't, and it's totally normal, and just with all this stuff, it's just an invitation to be curious and aware, and to see how we are in the world, and to take a pause and notice.
And it makes me think of how much desire is this pushing away desire, right? If it's like how much is I need to make this much money, is I don't want to be living the life that I'm living right now because it's too hard. And so how can we really bring in something good when we are pushing away something, right? It's not about accessing something deep within us. It's just something different, right? It just becomes a completely different. Yeah.
And they're two sides of the same coin, right? That idea of grasping and aversion, right? Like they're two sides of the same coin, because it's I want this because I want to get rid of this because I don't want that, so. And I think back to that manifesting point, right? If we're in that place of, I have to have this because I don't like what my life is right now. Like I don't want it to be like that. I want to get rid of that and I have that. And here you're just being stretched.
Yeah.
And like you're not getting anything that way.
Right. It just doesn't work. It doesn't.
And sometimes it does. Look, sometimes we can push.
Right.
But it's also interesting to be aware of, like, well, how does that end up playing out too?
Well, it is very interesting, because we can, through our own will, we can create a lot, but it's it may be out of that energy. Like when I think back to my old life, and a lot of my will from my businesses and stuff was like me really pushing really hard. But what was my life like every single day? I was exhausted, I was busy, like I created that. That's what it was. Like my life was like, okay, you want to push really hard, you're going to get some more stuff to push really hard about all the time. And so I was always, and so that was what I had. And so it's like, and that's also like, we have the karma of our culture, right? That is kind of the culture we live in, that is the American way, right? We feel like that, work hard, grind, right? This is like the words that we hear all the time.
We love the word grind these days. I'm grinding on Fortnite. You hear the kids saying that. I'm grinding on Fortnite. It's a grind. I gotta grind to the end of the year.
So like, but that is, and so that's how we define success. That's how we define, and I think we need to rethink that, carefully, like we really do, because as you were talking about the guy from Whole Foods, right? That he is creating out of a place of love. And it's always interesting to spend time with people, these like deeply creative, like amazing, not that I'm spending time, but like watching something on, who was I watching? I recently saw did you see the John Batiste documentary where he talks about it's a really great documentary about how he just talks about this really challenging year in his life where he's an amazing musician. He was on the Stephen Colbert Show. He was the guy who he was the music director. And then he took a leave of absence because his fiancée was very, very sick. And so it's like their journey through her illness, and simultaneous to her being extremely sick and hospitalized and going through chemotherapy and all these really challenging things, his career is skyrocketing, and he's like going to the Grammys, and he's winning the Grammys, and he's, but what struck me like watching that movie was just like the depth of groundedness that both of them had, and it's like, and the level of success that he was achieving, like it wasn't due to him making it happen. It was just coming out of him, and it was just really interesting. But I think you see that a lot when you're listening to people who are deeply tremendously successful, but they're also deeply connected to something inside themselves that, sustains their sanity throughout all of this, action and activity, and,
Yeah. It reminds me of, I love this phrase about mindfulness, meditation, life. The idea of, instead of figuring out, getting familiar with. Right? We're always just trying to figure out, what's my next move? What's my next step?
Yeah.
How am I gonna, how's my partner gonna respond to me in the way that I need, fix, figure out, like, get familiar with what's happening in your body, what's happening in your breath, like being, going out, taking time, being still, like get familiar with what is happening.
Yeah. And I think it's also interesting you talk about partner and like we're always like we're expecting our partner to meet our needs. It's like that's never gonna happen. Like you may meet someone who's going to meet most of your needs, right? And make you mostly happy, but that just they're just going to disappoint us. I mean, that is just the inevitability of relationships.
Well, as long as we're putting our happiness in somebody else's hand, then
right.
Absolutely.
Right.
100%.
And so it becomes a transactional relationship almost, right? It's like you make me feel this way, I'm going to make you feel this way. And when it doesn't work anymore, this relationship is going to be finished, and it's not really about real love, which is unconditional, right? And which is, and you could have a relationship based on growth and other things, but,
What you're making me think of is, Thich Nhat Hanh says, all you need to say is, dear one, I'm here for you.
Right.
It's, that's all we want,
right.
Dear one, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Whether they're being a jerk.
Right, right.
And in fact, and it's always tough, like you don't want to have a goal with things, you just want to come from what's true to yourself, but you're much more likely to move things in a direction where you're becoming connected with another person when you say, dear one, I'm here for you, versus like, you're being a jerk.
You're being a jerk right now.
Yeah.
Right. And like that's what we're conditioned to do. And it is kind of, it really is a beautiful way to look at relationships, to be what can I bring as opposed to what can I get. This idea of like, well, I need a man who's going to do this, and I need, who's going to meet my needs on several, this list of ways, as opposed to like, I want to be there for somebody. I want to really learn what it means to love somebody in a deep way.
And that's what, in John Mackey in that podcast, Whole Foods, he says, what's my goal? How can I be more caring? How can I be more loving?
Yeah.
How can I be more caring? How can I be more loving? Like if that were all of our compass, right?
And that's kind of bringing it back to this idea of manifestation, as opposed to like, what can I get out of this? What can I bring to this?
What can I bring to this?
Right? I have this interest in what can I bring to it? Like, what is my, what are my gifts and talents that could be best used in this way? And if we just give ourselves to something really 100%, right? Really, that's the key, is to like give it 100% and really give it from the right space. Letting go of the outcome, right? We don't know if it's going to work. We just we do what we can, and then just let it go.
Yeah.
And not be attached. Maybe
and
that's the key.
You're making me think of, sorry for
No.
We were right there. But you're making me think of, there's so many practices, right? But like, one practice of, doing some kind of ceremony with the moon, the phases of the moon, right? And that, when it's a new moon, right? And so there's no light, and it's gonna move, and the light's gonna start coming in, and it's gonna get fuller and fuller. And at that point, that's where we set our intentions, right? That can begin to bring light. And then when there's the full moon, there's a review of like, well, what happened there, and this is my time to release and let go.
Yeah, because there's a time for everything, right?
Yeah,
there's a time to,
And so I think I'm, the more I can get, connected with cycles and nature, and but that it can be cyclical like that, where we do, and then we
just let go.
Release. We do. We release. And
because the tree sprout, or the plant sprouts its seeds without any realization, like no expectation. It's just like, let me produce these seeds. I see it with my arugula right now. It's like, this is not a really good place to plant your seeds, but it's doing it anyway, right? It's like, it's doing it because it's what it does. It's part of like just what it does. It's part of the cycle of its life. And I guess as humans, it's like, we have these desires, and as opposed to like in a love relationship, right, where instead of saying like, how can you make me happy, it's like, how can I help others, how can I really, because it is only when we're not thinking of ourselves that we are truly happy, right? When we are in a space of doing something where we're not, you know, like if I feel really uptight and tense, the best thing for me to do is go serve food to people who need it, right? That's like something that will take me out of myself and see that like how many people are really challenged, or read something about someone who's really challenged, just to kind of give me that perspective, like it's all not about me. And I guess, yeah,
100%.
Yeah,
Service is,
but we can't go into it saying like, I'm going to do service. It's almost like we have to, you know, because if we come in like, I'm going to do service now, there's a self-righteousness a little bit in there that is a little bit like, there's a little hook in that, like, but it's almost, I don't know what, there has been times when I've done service and I haven't lost myself in it. And there's been times when I've done service and I've completely really just focused on other people, and I don't know what this little difference is.
Yeah, and I think too, like wording too, there can be like, I help people.
Yeah.
Versus I serve.
Right, yeah.
You know, that those are, you know, I help people puts, I have something I'm gonna help you get better.
Yeah.
You know, you need what I have.
I'm not suffering, you're suffering.
Yeah.
Right, like
but
there's something, there's a distance.
Yeah, and I feel like to your point of like true services, we're both.
Yeah, it's like
we're both learning, we're both getting something
we're just
out
two
of this.
human beings, and in this moment you're experiencing something that's a challenge, and it could be me in the next moment. And it's like there's no distance, there's no like, there's no even sympathy can sometimes be too much, you know, like the feeling of like it has to be I don't know if it's a mental experience, right? But it's just something that is different. Like you go into it not having maybe any expectations or whatever, you're just there to do something, and you're just getting lost in the action maybe, and you're, you know?
Yeah, and I think getting lost in the connection with another human being is, you know, I think when we'll go and when we're out in LA where my husband's family is, we always volunteer with this organization for people who are experiencing homelessness. And my habit now is like, I have a little thing that says like, if you want a hug. And some people do and some people don't, right? And but some people just hold me and hug me for a while, because I don't know, like all of us, like, you know, how many hugs are we getting a day, right? But in that moment, I'm getting so much.
Yeah.
They're getting so much.
Yeah.
We're having this human connection that is beyond any circumstance. And we're just experiencing beauty together. And I feel that the same too when I'm in the prison, and it's just, we're all just being human. We're all being vulnerable humans together, and that's so nourishing for all of us.
Yeah, it is. It's so what we need. I mean, it's what's missing from so many people's lives, right? And from my life, often, you know, like it's just like I need more deep connection, you know, and we can even just be around people all the time and not have a connection with them.
Oh yeah.
You know, just you know, you get so caught up in the business of life. And
what do you think you have gotten from gardening, from working with plants and being around them?
Well, you know, a lot what you talk about, like just understanding like the cycle of nature, when you kind of see that there's a time for planting, there's a time for reaping, that, you know, what's that parable? It really is true. You know, and that you have to kind of let it, some years you have an amazing harvest, some years you have a shitty harvest, and it's just like, and there's no way to control that. There's no, because it's like, it's the weather, you can't control the weather, or, I mean, you can put it in a greenhouse, you can protect it as best you can, but So it's a lot of, you have to plant the seeds, you hope for the best, but you have to also be unattached to what happens, because otherwise you were gonna be crying all gardening season, right? So you just, and then being in the dirt is just, to me, such a healing thing. Like, it's just, my whole neurological system changes when I'm in the garden. It's like, it just resets into something different. And yeah, I don't think I could live without that now after having it for a couple of years. You know, it's something I've always wanted, and it's interesting because my dad, he had a garden, and my dad was a very, very he struggled with a lot, and he struggled with controlling things, and he was a policeman, and it was kind of like he just didn't have a lot of patience, and he was, including with himself, right? So, but he loved gardening, and I'm like, and I connect with him now through the gardening. I'm like, Dad, now I know, like, what this brought you some peace, It's like, because it just does. It's like, it literally, being in the garden changes how you could being complete. You could feel completely tense, and you just go out into the garden and start digging, and all of it just washes away. It's amazing. So yeah, it's
yeah, that's really beautiful.
yeah.
And I think everything you just said about the seeds that's exactly manifesting.
Yeah.
That's just like a perfect.
Yeah. It doesn't, nature, if you watch nature manifesting, I mean, it's surrounded, look at all the abundance in nature. It's just there. It's just what it is. It actually is abundance, right? Just like we have everything inside us. Like, it's a perfect mirror for thinking of that and remembering that.
Yeah, what's a good life to you?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to try to talk about it. And I mean, for me, a good life is having a connection to God, to how, to my guru, and to really feel that, on a regular basis, and to feel it with others who also have that same desire. So, that kind of community. I would like to, I don't want to have an overly stressful job at this point. Creativity is really important to me. I want to make things, my sweaters. I want to make things for the people I love. I want to be in that process. That creative process is really kind of like getting lost in nothingness in a way. You just kind of, things flow through you. And, freedom to travel is nice, freedom to move around and do what you want. But, all those things that's kind of like extra. But if I really, and love, to be in a place of love where I feel love, and I give love, and I'm able to receive it, that's like a big thing, because for a long time I wasn't really able to do that. And that's like I could get lost in love. Love is just like, real happiness is that. And there's like details, that I would think that, that I would add in there, but I think those are the most important things for me.
Yeah, in these kind of conversations.
Yeah. Aww, I love you. So thank you so much for doing this today, and yeah, thank you for listening. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about what makes a good life, and how do you define that for yourself, and join in the conversation. So should we say goodbye?
Okay.
Bye, everybody.